This video is a formal investigation into the exact moment an idea goes from questionable to posthumous. We're dissecting 10 true stories of individuals who gambled against basic logic and lost spectacularly. For legal purposes, consider this a detailed instructional video on how not to win a Darwin Award. Don't be a hero. 1. In the never-ending war against germs, most of us arm ourselves with hand sanitizer and the occasional questionable 5-second rule. But for a gentleman in Japan named Kenji, this was not a war. It was a crusade, and he was its most zealous knight. Kenji's entire existence was a meticulously choreographed ballet of avoidance and sterilization. He viewed the microbial world with a level of paranoia usually reserved for Cold War spies, seeing every doorknob as a biohazard and every handshake as an invitation to the plague. One day, while researching new ways to purify his temple, he stumbled upon the industrial magic of steam cleaning. The articles raved about its power to obliterate 99.9% of bacteria from floors, countertops, and tile grout. A little flicker of inspiration, or what would soon prove to be catastrophic inspiration, ignited in his mind. The logic was so simple, so elegant, it was practically foolproof. If superheated water vapor could render a public toilet pristine, what could it do for the human body? He decided to skip the middleman and apply this industrial-strength solution directly to the source of all his anxiety: himself. He didn't just want to be clean, he wanted to be autoclaved. So Kenji acquired not one but 3 high-powered commercial steam machines, the kind used to degrease engine blocks. He then chose his arena, a small, poorly ventilated bathroom which he proceeded to hermetically seal with towels and duct tape, ensuring no precious, germ-killing steam could escape. He was transforming his bathroom into a personal sauna, but with the subtle ambiance of a lobster pot. He stepped inside, locked the door, and fired up his instruments of purification. At first, it must have felt like the most luxurious spa day of his life. The warm, moist air enveloped him, and he could practically feel the trillions of microscopic invaders screaming as they were boiled into oblivion. He had achieved peak cleanliness, but as the minutes ticked by, the pleasant warmth became a suffocating, oppressive heat. The very air he was trying to breathe was turning into scalding water, and the room became a pressure cooker with him as the main ingredient. His brilliant plan had one tiny flaw he'd overlooked in his obsessive quest for sterility. Humans are not tile grout. We are composed of delicate proteins that, when exposed to extreme heat, do something scientists call denaturing. It's a polite term for cooking. Trapped in his self-made, airtight steam room, Kenji was effectively poaching himself from the inside out. His body's cooling systems were overwhelmed, then utterly defeated. By the time anyone found him, the bathroom was the most sterile environment imaginable, and Kenji was the cleanest, most thoroughly cooked corpse the local authorities had ever seen. A tragic testament to the idea that you can, in fact, be too clean for your own good. 2. Some places on Earth are just nature's way of saying, stay out. The Eiger Mountain in Switzerland is one of them. It's a vertical death trap of ice and rock that has chewed up and spit out some of the most skilled mountaineers in history. It demands respect, caution, and a healthy dose of fear. Our next contestant, Lars, possessed none of these. What he did have was a GoPro, an insatiable hunger for social media validation, and an idea that was equal parts ambitious and idiotic. He decided the world needed a new sport: ski-base jumping. The vision was glorious. He'd ski down an impossibly steep face of the Eiger, launch into the abyss, throw a few mid-air tricks for the highlight reel, then gracefully pop his chute. To guarantee he hit the ramp with the velocity of a freight train, he spent hours in preparation, meticulously applying a special blend of wax to his skis. He treated this task with the focus of a NASA scientist, obsessing over friction coefficients and glide dynamics. His survival plan, meanwhile, apparently consisted of just shrugging and hoping for the best. He completely ignored a fundamental concept that most toddlers grasp after running around on a windy day: speed plus cold air equals really cold air. At the altitude he was jumping from, the wind chill he was about to create would make a polar vortex feel like a gentle tropical breeze. Dressed for agility, not for Arctic survival. Lars nailed the launch. He shot off the cliff edge, a perfect missile of fluorescent ski gear. And for a few seconds, he was a legend in his own mind. He was a bird. He was a god. He was also flash freezing. The wind, hitting him at over 80 miles an hour, wasn't just cold. It was a physical force, instantly robbing his hands of all heat and feeling. His fingers, which he would desperately need for the not dying part of the stunt, went from functioning human digits to useless frozen claws in about the time it takes to say hypothermia. The moment of truth arrived. It was time to pull the ripcord. His brain sent the urgent signal, but his hands had already left the chat. They were completely unresponsive, 2 lumps of frozen meat he was flapping uselessly against his own body. He could see the handle, he knew what he had to do, but he was physically incapable of doing it. He had spent so much time making sure his skis were fast that he forgot to make sure his hands would work at the end of the ride. He executed a flawless, breathtaking flight straight into the highlight reel of the great beyond, ultimately impacting the valley floor and proving that even the most perfectly waxed skis can't help you outslide the Grim Reaper. 3. Is an adrenaline-fueled stunt even a stunt if it doesn't get a million views online? This was the philosophical quandary that plagued Marco, a base jumper who felt that simply plummeting towards the earth wasn't getting the clicks it used to. He needed to innovate. He needed spectacle. So, he locked himself in his garage and emerged as the self-proclaimed inventor of the human meteor experience. The concept was simple, a work of pure, unadulterated marketing genius. He jury-rigged his wingsuit with a ridiculous number of high-lumen LED strobe lights and a series of smoke canisters. His plan was to perform a night jump, lighting himself up like a 4th of July finale that had gained sentience and a death wish. He imagined the footage, the news articles, the legendary status. He spent weeks perfecting the look, calculating smoke duration and battery life for maximum visual impact. What he didn't spend a single second on was a simple test run in, say, his darkened living room, to see what this cosmic light show would look like from the perspective of the guy strapped into the middle of it. On the fateful night, Marco stood on the cliff's edge, ready for his grand debut. He hit the master switch, and his suit roared to life in a blinding eruption of light and smoke. He leaped into the darkness, and for anyone watching from the ground, it was an absolute masterpiece. A brilliant, pulsating orb of light, trailing a comet's tail of smoke, blazed across the night sky. It was mesmerizing. It was also a catastrophic design flaw. From Marco's point of view, the world instantly ceased to exist. The very lights meant to make him visible to others had turned his own helmet into a torture chamber of pure, unadulterated photons. He was completely, irrevocably blinded. His retinas, which were not designed to stare directly into an aircraft landing light, had collectively thrown in the towel. He was flying deaf, dumb, and, most importantly, blind. Every instrument, every altitude reading, and critically, the ripcord for his parachute was completely washed out in a disorienting, hellish glare. He had become so fixated on creating an unforgettable spectacle for others that he had rendered himself incapable of seeing anything at all. He was now just a passenger in his own dazzling high-speed funeral procession. His one-man light show came to an abrupt and very dark conclusion when he flew directly into a granite cliff face, providing a finale that was less human meteor and more bug on a windshield. 4. In the grand digital coliseum of the internet, there is no currency more valuable than going viral. It's a fleeting, chaotic form of fame that has inspired people to dance alongside moving cars, eat laundry detergent, and generally treat the laws of both man and nature as optional suggestions. Our next contender for the digital throne was a teenager from the Philippines named Rico, a young man who saw the Mount Everest of bad ideas and decided he was born to climb it. He wanted his 15 minutes of fame, and he was willing to trade a lifetime of functioning brain cells to get it. His chosen path to glory was a new, homebrewed contest he dubbed the Fish Sauce Challenge. For the uninitiated, fish sauce is not a beverage. It's a condiment forged in the depths of culinary Mordor, a hyper-concentrated liquid salt bomb made from fermented anchovies. A few drops can season an entire pot of soup. An entire bottle, meanwhile, contains enough sodium to mummify a pharaoh. Rico, flanked by his hype crew of equally brilliant friends with smartphones, saw this bottle not as a flavoring agent, but as a trophy. The rules were simple. Chug the entire thing in under a minute. With the cameras rolling, Rico put the bottle to his lips and began to drink, his face a contorted mask of pure determination and instant regret. The taste was likely indescribable, a flavor profile somewhere between a salt lick and an old fishing net. But he powered through, driven by the siren song of future likes and shares. He slammed the empty bottle down on the table, a champion. He beat his chest, basking in the cheers of his friends. He was a legend. For a glorious 30 seconds, he was the king of the world. And then, his body's accounting department began to run the numbers. The biblical flood of sodium he had just mainlined into his system didn't just enter his bloodstream. It staged a violent coup. His system, in a desperate attempt to dilute the saline apocalypse, started pulling water from every available cell. This caused his blood volume to expand at a terrifying rate, turning his veins and arteries into overpressurized fire hoses. His blood pressure didn't just rise, it launched itself into the stratosphere. Rico's triumphant grin quickly melted into a look of dawning horror as a sensation akin to a grenade detonating behind his eyes took over. The delicate blood vessels in his brain, which are designed to handle the stress of a tough math problem, not a tsunami of fermented fish juice, simply gave up. They burst. He collapsed, the victim of a self-inflicted, condiment-fueled brain hemorrhage. Rico did, in fact, go viral. The video was a hit, but the fame he so desperately craved was enjoyed only by his surviving friends, who now had a cautionary tale that was way more effective than any health class lecture. 5. There exists a certain type of environmental activist whose passion is matched only by their complete and utter detachment from practical reality. Meet Talon. Talon loved nature. He loved trees. He loved the earth. He loved the very idea of being a noble guardian of the wilderness. The only thing he didn't seem to love was listening to people who actually knew what they were talking about. His sworn enemy was a local logging company that he viewed as a ravenous horde of planet-devouring monsters. When he learned they were planning to clear a section of forest on a notoriously unstable hillside, he knew he had to make a stand. He hatched a plan that was bold, symbolic, and profoundly stupid. He would become a modern-day druid, living in the canopy of a magnificent ancient redwood to prevent the loggers from cutting it down. He packed his granola, his solar-powered phone charger, and his unshakable sense of self-righteousness and scaled the giant. What Talon had failed to notice, in his haste to become one with the trees, were the numerous, very large, very bright signs the loggers had posted. These signs, along with the bright red X painted on his chosen tree's trunk, weren't marking it for a routine felling. They were marking it for an emergency removal. The loggers you see weren't villains in a cartoon. They were professionals who had identified this specific, glorious tree as a catastrophic liability. Its root system had been compromised by erosion, and it was located in the middle of a well-documented landslide zone. They weren't trying to kill the tree. They were trying to stop it from killing someone when it inevitably toppled over. But Talon saw this as corporate propaganda. From his perch 100 feet up, he blogged about the soul of the forest and posted selfies with the hashtag #TreeProtector, all while blissfully ignoring the fact that his sanctuary was a ticking time bomb. A week into his protest, the universe decided to weigh in. A series of heavy rains saturated the already unstable hillside. The ground, which had the structural integrity of wet oatmeal, finally gave way. With a groan that echoed through the valley, the earth beneath Talon's tree dissolved into a river of mud. The compromised roots snapped, and the colossal redwood he had chained himself to began to fall, not with the crash of a logger's saw, but with the slow, majestic, and unstoppable force of gravity itself. Talon, the self-appointed guardian of the forest, was killed instantly when his arboreal fortress became his tombstone, ironically proving the loggers had been right all along and saving them a considerable amount of work in the process. 6. Have you ever had one of those days where you make a bad decision and then spend the rest of the day making a series of progressively worse decisions to try and fix the first one? Well, meet Kevin, a man who built an entire career out of this principle. Kevin was a petty thief, and one sunny afternoon, he spotted his golden opportunity. a fancy-looking GPS unit sitting on the dashboard of an unlocked luxury car. In his mind, this was a quick score, an easy $100. He snatched the device, tucked it under his shirt, and sprinted away, feeling like a criminal mastermind. His first mistake was stealing something. His second and far more critical mistake was failing to understand what, exactly, he had stolen. He thought he had a simple navigation tool. What he actually had was a digital snitch, a little electronic Judas equipped with a hidden, live tracking feature that was, at that very moment, broadcasting his exact location to the car's owner, and by extension, the police. Kevin, blissfully unaware that he was carrying his own homing beacon, scurried back to his hideout. A fourth-story apartment that he was about to discover had far too few exits. He was probably admiring his loot, calculating its resale value, when a firm, authoritative knock echoed on his door. Panic flared in his chest. How? How could they have possibly found him so fast? He didn't have time to ponder the mysteries of modern technology. His brain, which was already running on a low-wattage bulb, kicked into emergency override mode and produced the worst escape plan in the history of bad escape plans. Ignoring the front door, the fire escape, and the basic concept of staying put, he decided his best route to freedom was a daring, parkour-style maneuver across the balconies. He scrambled onto his own small balcony, heart-pounding, and eyed the 3-foot gap to his neighbor's apartment. In the movies, the hero makes this leap effortlessly. Kevin was not the hero in a movie. He was the clumsy idiot in a Darwin Awards compilation. He took a breath, leaped, and for a split second he was airborne. Then physics, a science he had clearly slept through in high school, made its presence known. His fingers scraped against the railing of the next balcony, failing to find a purchase. His grand escape devolved into a frantic, flailing scramble against the unforgiving pull of gravity. The police, who had tracked him with pinpoint satellite accuracy, were just about to break down his door when Kevin finished his descent, ending his crime spree with a final, messy impact on the pavement 4 stories below. He had successfully eluded capture, but permanently failed the landing. 7. There are certain tools that come with an unwritten, yet universally understood, set of rules. You don't juggle chainsaws, you don't use a toaster in the bathtub, and you absolutely positively do not stare down the barrel of a loaded firearm to see if it's clean. This last, and perhaps most important piece of wisdom, was tragically lost on a hunter from Montana we'll call Jed. Jed was a man who believed his decades of experience with his rifle had granted him a special immunity from the basic laws of physics and common sense. After a long day out in the wilderness, he sat down in his garage for a bit of routine maintenance on his prized bolt-action rifle. He ran a cloth through it, oiled the action, and then decided to perform a final inspection of the barrel for any lingering obstructions. Now, a normal person would use a cleaning rod or a bore light, tools specifically designed for this purpose. But Jed was a modern man, a pioneer of the digital frontier. Why use a dedicated tool when you have a multi-purpose supercomputer in your pocket? He decided the best way to illuminate the inside of his rifle barrel was with the flashlight app on his smartphone. This was his first catastrophic mistake in a rapidly escalating symphony of idiocy. His second was failing to perform the single most critical step of firearm handling, confirming the weapon was unloaded. In his mind, he was sure he'd used all his rounds, a fatal assumption that turned his cleaning session into a game of Russian roulette, where all the chambers were loaded. So, Jed shouldered the rifle backwards, pointing the business end directly at his own face, and brought his phone up to the muzzle. His hands, slick with gun oil, fumbled with the phone's screen. In his attempt to tap the little flashlight icon, his clumsy finger also activated the camera, arming the high-intensity flash. He peered into the dark steel tube, a moron gazing into the abyss, and the abyss was about to gaze right back. The oily phone then slipped from his grasp. In that split-second reflexive lurch that we all do to save our $1,000 pocket computer from a concrete floor, Jed's hand jerked forward, bumping the rifle's trigger. The sequence of events that followed was instantaneous and brutally efficient. A microscopic electronic signal fired the camera's flash, and a slightly more robust mechanical action fired the 36 round still chambered in the gun. For a fraction of a second, Jed got exactly what he wanted. A very, very bright light at the end of the tunnel. He successfully diagnosed and permanently cleared the obstruction in the barrel, which turned out to be a live cartridge, and in the process, he also cleared his head of any further bad ideas or thoughts of any kind, forever. 8. Most people have a fairly standard reaction to receiving a mysterious, unmarked package in the mail. Suspicion. If that package is also ticking, or has way too much postage, or is addressed with cut-out magazine letters, that suspicion rightly escalates to a full-blown, call the authorities and hide behind the couch situation. A man in Alaska named Hank, however, operated on a different level of curiosity, one that bordered on a death wish. When a strange, heavy shoebox with no return address appeared on his doorstep, he didn't call the police. At first, he poked it, he sniffed it, he gently shook it. When it failed to reveal its secrets, he finally conceded that this might be a job for the professionals. This was the one and only good decision Hank would make that day. He drove the suspicious package down to the local police station, walked up to the front desk, and plopped it down with a puzzled look. The desk sergeant, a man who had seen his fair share of nonsense, immediately recognized the potential for a very bad day. He calmly evacuated the lobby and called in the bomb squad, treating the situation with the gravity it deserved. The officers cordoned off the area and began their careful, methodical examination. This is where Hank's patience, a resource he apparently possessed in microscopic quantities, ran out. He had places to be, things to do, and these slow-moving government employees were taking entirely too long to solve his little mystery. He watched them handle the box with extreme care, and in his mind, he didn't see safety protocol, he saw incompetence. "It's just a box," he grumbled, his frustration mounting. Finally, he could take it no more. In a move that left every officer in the room frozen in disbelief, Hank strode past the police tape, snatched the package back off the table, and turned to the bewildered cops. He gave the box a series of violent, aggressive shakes, like a child trying to guess his birthday present. "So, what do you think it is?" he asked impatiently, rattling the contents for emphasis. He was, in essence, trying to speed-run a bomb disposal by annoying the bomb into a confession. The bomb, as it turned out, was more than happy to reveal its identity. The anti-tampering mechanism inside, which had been patiently waiting for just such an idiot to come along, did its job perfectly. The resulting explosion provided Hank with a definitive and instantaneous answer to his question. The bomb squad never got a chance to offer their professional opinion, as they were a little busy dealing with the sudden, violent remodeling of their precinct lobby and scraping what was left of Hank off the ceiling. 9. In the relentless pursuit of the perfect social media photo, some people will risk anything, their dignity, their safety, and in the case of a young woman in China named Mei Li, their continued existence on this mortal coil. Mei Li was an aspiring influencer whose entire life was a carefully curated series of candid moments in breathtaking locations. Her philosophy was that if a moment wasn't captured, framed, and filtered for an audience, it might as well have never happened. One afternoon, she found what she believed would be the backdrop for her magnum opus, a scenic plaza at the top of a hill, which featured a long, majestic staircase cascading down to the street below. At the very edge of this plaza sat a collection of large, decorative stone spheres, each one weighing over a ton. They looked ancient, immovable, a part of the very foundation of the city. Mei Li looked at one of these granite behemoths and saw not a piece of landscaping, but a prop, a throne. She decided a simple photo standing next to it was for amateurs. She needed to conquer it. She needed to be perched atop the sphere, one hand raised to the sky, a portrait of effortless, adventurous beauty. What she failed to notice was that the sphere wasn't cemented in place. It was a purely ornamental feature, resting in a shallow, decorative divot, held in place by little more than its own immense weight and the gentle suggestion of gravity. It was, for all intents and purposes, a one-ton bowling ball waiting for a push. Mei Li provided that push. As she awkwardly clambered onto its smooth, rounded surface, her shifting weight was just enough to disrupt its delicate equilibrium. There was a sickening, grinding sound as the sphere broke free from its mooring. The triumphant pose she was planning instantly transformed into a desperate scramble for purchase. The sphere began to roll, slowly at first, and then, with rapidly increasing purpose, toward the top of the grand staircase. Meili was no longer an influencer. She was a terrified, screaming hood ornament on a runaway instrument of geological destruction. The sphere hit the first step and launched into a catastrophic, city-destroying journey that would have made the Indiana Jones production team proud. It bounded down the stairs, gaining terrifying momentum, obliterating everything in its path: lampposts, vendor carts, unfortunate pigeons. Meili clung to it for dear life, her viral moment having become a bit too kinetic for her liking. Her ride came to a sudden, catastrophic end at the bottom of the stairs, where the sphere finally met its match in the form of a solid concrete wall. Her quest for the perfect picture was a success in a way. The aftermath was certainly dramatic, but the final shot was less wanderlust and more crime scene, proving that physics is one audience you simply can't fool with a good filter. 10. There is a certain elegance to a well-executed heist. The planning, the timing, the flawless getaway. And then there is the approach favored by a French jewel thief named Antoine, which involved snatching a handful of diamonds and then running around in a blind panic until a bad idea presented itself as a stroke of genius. After a smash and grab at a Parisian jewelry store went sideways, Antoine found himself sprinting through the city streets with the gendarmerie hot on his heels. Desperate, he ducked into the first open door he saw, which happened to belong to a high-end antique furniture showroom. He needed to disappear, and fast. His eyes landed on it. A massive, ornate 18th century armoire. It was a masterpiece of woodworking, with thick, heavy doors and an air of quiet dignity. To Antoine, it looked like the perfect hiding spot, a fortress of solitude where he could wait out the heat. As he scrambled inside and pulled the heavy doors shut, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. He was a genius. He heard the police rush past the store, their sirens fading into the distance. He had done it. He had won. He waited a few minutes before trying to leave, only to discover a critical design feature of 18th century craftsmanship. The wardrobe had no internal handle, and its thick, hand-carved doors formed a near-perfect airtight seal to protect fine linens from moths and dust. His clever hiding spot had just become his own personal prison. His initial relief curdled into concern, which quickly blossomed into full-blown terror. He started to bang on the walls, but the thick wood muffled his cries into faint, pathetic thuds. Then his world started to move. He felt the wardrobe being lifted by unseen hands. Movers. He screamed louder, but they likely assumed it was just the creaking of old wood. He didn't know it, but he had chosen to hide in a piece that had been sold that very morning, a prized acquisition for a wealthy German collector, and it was already crated and scheduled for immediate international freight. Antoine had successfully hidden not just from the police, but from the entire nation of France. His frantic escape from a 5-year prison sentence had earned him a much more permanent and much more compact form of confinement. Days later, when the new owners in Munich opened their magnificent purchase, they discovered it came with an unexpected and deeply unpleasant surprise. Antoine had managed the perfect getaway, so perfect that he'd escaped everything, including the local oxygen supply, proving that sometimes the best hiding places are the ones nobody ever thinks to look in, for very good reason. Now for the real challenge. Every town has a local legend who almost made this list, that one person whose story of survival is a miracle of science. Without using real names, tell us the story of your hometown's Darwin Award runner-up in the comments. Let's build a hall of fame for the ones who somehow survived. Like the video if you feel smarter by comparison, and subscribe for your next dose of why warning labels exist.